Let's take a look at the concept of data flow in BW next. As you can see here, it is actually considered multi-level data flow. Okay, because as I mentioned earlier, that once data is loaded into BW, it can be further loaded from one object to another. Okay, so if you look at the left-hand side, when data is first loaded into BW, it is stored in a data source /PSA, okay, persistent staging area first. And then from there, it can be loaded into a info provider, which we'll talk more about later, okay? But from the PSA to the info provider, we can also have other objects such as an info source, which, by the way, is optional. Info source was used more commonly in old versions of BW. Okay, it is not as commonly used today. But anyway, from one object to another, like from PSA to info provider, you need to have a transformation taking place first. Okay, so transformation is needed, and then after that, data can be loaded from PSA to the info provider using the DTP process, okay, data transfer process, as I talked about earlier. And then it's multi-level, which means that it is also possible that another info provider can also provide data to the info provider that you see at the top. Okay, so you can have multiple levels. You can have also have multiple flows going into the same info provider. As another illustration, again, coming from outside a source system, we have data loaded into BW first into a PSA, right? And that is done using an info package, as I mentioned earlier. All right, so that's the E extraction in ETL. Okay, but then once data is inside BW, it can then be further loaded from one object, such as PSA, to another object. In this diagram, it shows an info queue, for instance. Okay, but again, from PSA to the info queue, we need a transformation first, so that to eliminate any possible differences between the structures of the two objects. So we need transformation, and then we use a DTP to do the loading finally. Okay. So again, within a BW itself, you can also have transformation and loading, as illustrated here. And then the next diagram shows basically the same thing, but with two data flows, one from source system 1 and second from source system 2, and then going through PSA and then to a data store object, and then eventually to a info cube. Okay, we'll be talking about PSAs, data store objects, and info cubes in more detail in the next few slides. Okay, but again, the example illustrates the data flows from bottom to top, involving transformation and also DTPs. Okay, so the first layer we've talked about so far is the ETL layer. Okay, one that is concerned with basically getting data from outside into a BW. Then the second layer is the staging layer, which basically is the area where data is first stored when data is loaded from outside. Okay, so the staging layer basically is made of a set of database tables for intermediate storing of data. Okay, so basically relational tables that are used to store data, and once data is stored there, we can then check for data quality. We can check for any consistency or data errors and so on. Okay, and if there are any errors, we can make changes right there before data is further loaded into other objects for processing or reporting purposes. Okay, so the staging layer can be used for data quality and data maintenance purposes, and it is implemented as a PSA in BW, as I mentioned before.